Okay, in this video I want to talk about some of the material in section 4.3. This is the section on Mendel's theory of the gene. And in particular I want to talk about the example that Appia discusses on the bottom of page 131 and the top of page 132. So, well, just to begin, one definition we have is this definition of an allele, which is also on page 131, and you'll see that it says there that an allele is just a gene. So every cell has, or the way Mendel conceived of it, every cell has two copies of a gene for any particular trait. So here we have two copies of the gene for flower color in this plant. Both copies are determine or make the flower red. And over here, the two alleles are, that is, the two genes that determine this plant's flower color, make it white. Okay, so if we're crossing these two plants, if these are our two parent plants and we breed them, then what color are the flowers going to be in the next generation? And you'll see that on the bottom of page 131, in this experiment anyway, or in this example, we end up with all of the offspring having pink flowers. So each parent passes on a copy of its gene, so some of the offspring will get, from this parent will get this gene, so that's the one here and here, and then the other offspring will get a copy of this gene here. Of course, both are the same, so it ends up having the same effect. And then likewise for this plant here. Some offspring will get a copy of this gene, and some offspring will get a copy of this gene. As it works out, every plant in the next generation ends up with one gene. One of the alleles is for the red color, and one is for the white color. And with this combination, that creates flowers with that are pink in color. Okay, so now if we take one of these plants, so let's just say for the sake of argument we take this plant here and we breed it with a new plant that has red flowers, then we know, of course, that the alleles for flower color, the genes for flower color in this plant are one gene is red and one is white, and we also know that in this plant, the red one, that both of the genes for flower color, both of the alleles, will be for the red flower color. Okay, so the blending theory predicts that the flowers will be what color in the next generation? Now, if you look on the top of page 131, the very top, you'll see that Appia writes, most biologists of his day, that is of Mendel's day, believed that plants and animals inherited their characteristics from their parents by a blending of genetic material, rather like the mixing of fluids. So that's what we're calling the blending theory, and Appia talks about what will happen on the top of page 132. But if you think about that description of the blending theory, you might be able to just imagine yourself what the blending theory would predict that we would find in the next generation. If we mix, if the genetic material is like fluids, and we mix pink with red, those would make a darker pink. So that's what the blending theory would predict, that the flowers of the offspring of these two plants, if these two plants are bred, their offspring will have dark pink flowers. Now, Mendel's theory, of course, suggests that the genetic material is passed on in these discrete units. Mendel's theory, of course, suggests that the genetic material is not passed on like fluids, but it's passed on as discrete units, which are these genes. So, just as we saw on the previous slide, each of these genes is copied and passed on to the next generation, and that's what determines the flower color, or any of the traits in the offspring. Okay, so Mendel's theory is going to predict, even if we don't calculated exactly, we know that if in the next generation we're going to get some offspring that have this gene contributed from this parent and this gene contributed from this parent, and so Mendel's theory is going to predict that those plants will have red flowers, and then some of the offspring will have this gene contributed from this parent and this gene contributed from this parent, and those offspring are going to have the pink flowers, just as we see right here. Okay, so the experiment was done, and as it says on the top of page 132, or at least in the example, what was found was that some of the offspring did have the red flowers, and some of them did have the pink flowers, which is exactly what Mendel's theory predicted. Of course, just to keep in mind, this slide gives you Mendel's explanation. It shows you what genes each of these flowers is thought to have, but of course anyone who's doing this experiment isn't going to see these genes. They're only going to see the flower colors. So the genes, that is the colors that we have down here. These letters, standing for genes, explain why we got what we got, and they explain it in terms of Mendel's theory.